Good evening. I would like to call to order the City Council meeting for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for January 22nd, 2024. If you would please stand as you are able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll of the members?
Jenny Snell.
Here.
Scott Ohm.
Here.
Rachel Haltine.
Present.
Amanda Weaver.
Here.
Corey Stites.
Here.
Leah Dozman.
Here.
Dan Larson.
Here.
And it has been reported that Councilmember Hoppe will not be here this evening. Mr. Mayor, there are 7 members present. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilors, in your packet, we have City Council meeting minutes of January 8th, 2024. Mr. Larson, do you have a correction on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the public forum section from our last meeting, one of the first speakers, Mr. Mark Garcia, identified himself as a Wheat Ridge resident for 23 years. And he also identified himself as a retired officer from the Denver Police Department. If we could correct that in the minutes.
Thank you. That correction has already been entered.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other corrections? Seeing none, the meeting stand approved as corrected. Are there any changes to be noted in the agenda? Seeing none, we'll proceed with the agenda as presented. We have a couple of proclamations today, and I'll go to the podium. We have a proclamation tonight in support of Black History Month, February 2024. Whereas February's Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievement by Black Americans, recognition of their role in the U.S. history, and a time to reflect on the continued struggle for racial justice and equality. And whereas experts say understanding Black history and learning more about systemic racism is essential to our country to grow as a nation. And whereas Carter G. Woodson, known as the father of Black history, developed Black History Month. Woodson, whose parents were enslaved, was an author, historian, and the second Black American to earn a PhD at Harvard University. And whereas Woodson chose February to coincide with the birthdays of Frederick Douglass, a famed abolitionist who escaped from slavery, and President Abraham Lincoln, who formally abolished slavery. And whereas, with a resolution passed in 2000, Wheat Ridge City Council confirmed that, quote, racism and hate have no place in our city, and there is much work to be done to stop pervasive, long-standing, and devastating racial injustice in our community, close quote. And whereas, in 2021, the city formed the Wheat Ridge Race and Equity Task Force to review city policies, services, ordinances, and community systems and identify policies and practices that contribute to discrimination. And whereas, to continue this work, the city is accepting applications for the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility IDEA Committee as to advise the City Council on policies and practices to make Wheat Ridge a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. Now therefore be it resolved that the Wheat Ridge City Council and the Mayor of Wheat Ridge formally designate the month of February 2024 as Black History Month, dated this 22nd day of January 2024. We are also pleased tonight to swear in Margie Greer, who is, I think, the Senior Deputy Clerk. So I want to turn the program over to our current clerk, Steve Kirkpatrick.
among the many duties that the clerk is assigned to do is the clerk is empowered to administer oaths of office. As a consequence of that, Margie Greer and I have between us administered this same oath literally hundreds of times. So we're going to do it from memory. Please raise your right hand. I, Margie Greer,
I, Margie Greer,
do solemnly and sincerely
do solemnly and sincerely
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that I will support the Constitution and laws
that I will support the constitutions and laws
of the United States,
of the United States,
the state of Colorado,
the state of Colorado,
and the charter and code of laws of the city.
and the charter and codes of law of the city,
That I will faithfully perform
and that I will faithfully perform
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of Senior Deputy City Clerk
of Senior Deputy City Clerk
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations. You're now officially the Senior Deputy Clerk. Thank you. I want to thank council again and the staff for all the work you did to make this position possible. And I'm sure it will add enough bandwidth that we'll be able to do even more marvelous things. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, would it be okay if Margie introduced herself to council? Thank you.
Thank you. Ally just wanted to embarrass me. She knows I'm shy when it comes to speaking in public. So a little bit about myself. I've been in municipal government about 30 years. Started with a volunteer with the Lakewood Housing Authority. Worked for the Edgewaters Urban Renewal Authority. Became the Edgewater City Clerk. While I was the Edgewater City Clerk, I served in office one term on City Council in Lakewood. Was hired off of council to be their city clerk, where I spent 18 years, retired in 2019, so I've been around. Looking forward to helping Wheat Ridge as well. Thank you.
We're now at our public's right to speak. Members of the public may come and address the council for 3 minutes at this time on any item that is not on the agenda. We have, let's see, one speaker that has signed up to join us online. We have Elise White, who resides at 5924 West 39th Place and would like to speak about the Silver Bullet shooting range. So, Ms. White, if you would please unmute yourself and introduce yourself once again, then you'll have 3 minutes to address the council. I see you online. I have not heard you yet, if you are trying to speak. Okay. Give us just a moment. We're going to have a little audio difficulty here in council chambers, but we've got a resolution happening now. Give it just another minute or two, Ms. White, and I hope we'll have the audio. Okay. Ms. White, the audio should be working. Do you hear me? And please speak, and we'll see if we hear you.
Okay. I can hear you. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can. Please continue.
Okay. My name is Elisa White, and I recently moved to Wheat Ridge from Denver, just a few miles away. But I was just concerned about the Silver Bullet shooting range. I live due north of there, about 2.5, 3 blocks. And I live on 39th Place. And when you sit outside, or even when you're in your living room, you can hear, shots all day from like 10 to 7. And I talked to my neighbors, and it does bother them. but they just feel like there's nothing that can be done. So just for the record, I wanted to make that complaint and see if there's been other complaints in the past about that.
Okay, thank you very much. We will also entertain public comment now on a special study session that will happen right after our meeting here. I don't have anyone signed up to speak either online or in council chambers, so we will move past that, and we will go to our agenda item number 1. Councilor Dozeman, would you please introduce this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Motion to approve an appointment to the Wheat Ridge District 4 Planning Commission. At issue on November 9th, 2023, Dan Larson from District 4 resigned from the Planning Commission effective immediately to accept a position as City Council member. The vacancy was posted on the City of Wheat Ridge website and promoted through various channels from November 13th to January 12th. Applications have been compiled for the council's review so that the seat may be filled.
Thank you. This will be a motion of the council. It is not quasi-judicial. Councilor Dozeman, may I have a motion on this item?
Yes, I move to appoint Michael Moore to the Planning Commission term to expire March 2nd, 2026.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion has passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. We'll move to agenda item number 2. Councilor Snell, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is resolution number 05-2024, a resolution amending the 2024 open space budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation in the amount of $65,000 for the purpose of accepting funds from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment for Mile High Youth Corps work along the Greenbelt.
Why don't you read, do you have the issue statement there that you might read?
I will continue reading. Thank you. The city received funding from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, CDPHE, Supplemental Environmental Program for Mile High Youth Corps work in 2024. The funding was received in 2023 after the 24 budget was finalized. A budget supplemental is required to ensure the funds can be used in 2024 for a fuel reduction work along the Greenbelt.
Thank you. This will be a resolution of the council. It is not quasi-judicial. Mr. Goff, do we have any further staff report on this item?
We're here for any questions you may have, but just to add that this work will be to continue fuel reduction work in the Greenbelt. We've been doing for several years.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anyone signed up to speak on this item, either in council chambers or online, so I will open it up to questions from council of staff on this item. Seeing none, Councilor Sell, may I have a motion on agenda item number 2?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 05-2024, a resolution amending the 2024 open space budget to reflect the approval of a supplemental budget appropriation in the amount of $65,000 for the purpose of accepting funds received from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment for Mile High Youth Corps work along the Greenbelt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Stites. Is there any discussion? Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to share my excitement that this program continues to get funding. I hear from a lot of District 2 residents that live along the Greenbelt whose house is back to the Greenbelt that there's a lot of concern about fire coming up through the Greenbelt up to their homes. So doing management for wildfires in our community is incredibly important, and I know District 2 community members are grateful for it. I'm happy to be supporting it.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion has passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to agenda item number 3. Councilor Larson, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 3 tonight is a motion to approve the purchase and payment of an international snowplow truck and an Elgin street sweeper in a total amount not to exceed $517,515. At issue tonight, each year, the city identifies a proposed list of vehicle replacements within the city fleet. In 2024, a snowplow truck and a street sweeper are scheduled for replacement. Staff recommends the purchase of a 2024 International snowplow truck under a Denver Department of Transportation agreement at a cost of $159,617, and an Elgin street sweeper under a Sourcewell cooperative agreement at a cost of $357,898.
Thank you. This will be accepting a bid by the city council. It's not quasi-judicial. Mr. Goff, do we have any further staff presentation on this item?
We don't. We're here for any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no one signed up from the public to speak on this item, either in person or online, so I will now go to any questions from council. Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Just a quick question, just mostly curiosity. Since these are replacements, what's being done with the old ones?
They'll be sent to auction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. I'm really curious, what is a regenerative air street sweeper?
Yeah, it's more, so a typical street sweeper will agitate the debris in the street and then will actually allow it to kind of be sucked up or moved into the holder, whereas regenerative is more like a vacuum cleaner where it actually has suction in it, so it picks up more of the fine pollutants, smaller particles. So especially in the spring, when we're looking at trying to capture a lot of dust and debris, the regenerative is the one that we'll send out for the most part. So the big one kind of gets bigger, or the regular sweeper gets bigger particles, and this one gets smaller particles.
Okay, and then what do we do with the stuff that the sweepers collects? Where does that go?
So we actually, because of the presence of heavy metals and other debris in it, we do have to send that to a landfill for disposal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. The old equipment, the street sweeper and the snowplow are going off to auction. And in the report, it says that the replacement snowplow equipment will not be outfitted until probably this time next year. Is there a concern that could be an open spot that is not being covered?
Yes, excellent question. Actually, we have an older one that we've kept back specifically for that. So we'll be able to get through this winter with this current plow. We'll send it to auction probably sometime this summer. And then if need be for next fall, we probably still won't have it. We still have one in the mix that will be replaced likely the following year that we'll be able to use. So we'll still have 4 available.
Thank you.
Any further questions from council before I ask for a motion? Okay, seeing none, Councilor Larson, may I have a motion on this item?
Certainly, Mayor. The motion tonight is, I move to approve the purchase and payment of an International snowplow truck and an Elgin street sweeper at a total amount not to exceed $515.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by, who else had one? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Stites, always on the quick there. Will the clerk please poll the council?
Mr. Mayor, the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes our business items this evening. We will go and see now about our city manager's matters. Mr. Goff.
We have a study session this evening, so just quickly, reminder, we have no council meeting next Monday. It's the 5th Monday, but we'll be back on February 5th for a study session.
Okay,
That's all I got.
Thank you very much. City attorney's matters, Mr. Dahl.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Thank you so much. We will go to elected officials matters and start with our clerk, Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing new this evening.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Councilor Snell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick things. I first want to just give some recognition to our city staff. Councilor Larson and I have had some tremendous meetings with various departments, just getting us up to speed on everything that's going on behind the scenes in the city and meeting folks, and I'm so grateful to that. And it's certainly not done. We've got more departments to cover, but I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to the staff that's taken time out to put together presentations and take us on park tours and lots of great information. So thank you to everyone, and we've got the best city staff ever, I think. And just one more thing, the point-in-time counts are currently going on, and I just wanted to say a big thank you to all those folks that are volunteering for that. That's very important work, and the accuracy of those counts really speaks to how we are able to take care of our unhoused neighbors in the future. So thanks to everyone volunteering.
Thank you. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got several things tonight. Most of them are fun, invitations. I want to bring up, of course, the Happiness Gardens update is particularly special tonight because on Friday, February 2nd, there is going to be a Mother Patch dedication at Happiness Gardens, and this is, I'm just going to read this out loud. This will be a profound experience dedicated to revitalizing our connection with the land and embracing Indigenous practices and people. This event, centered around a special land blessing, is focused on the practice of returning the buffalo and how it heals our soil and nourishes a harmonious relationship with Mother Earth. Of note, the event will be led by Wheat Ridge residents and Indigenous relations consultant Beverly Castaneda. So I think that's a really special thing to be happening in a very special place in District 2. My next invitation is the AT-ATS, the mighty AT-ATS, the Active Transportation Advisory Team, is hosting their State of the City event on Thursday, the 8th of February, and that will be at 6 o'clock at Esther's. I will be there. I believe council members Snell and Ohm will be there. I hope others will be there, and we'll be celebrating good stuff from the year behind us and talking about the years ahead to make our city even more walk and bike friendly. To that end, I want to just give some recognition to our Public Works Department. I had to ride my bike downtown for a meeting last week, and 35th Avenue in Denver is a designated neighborhood bikeway that I usually take. And I was riding on 35th Avenue beautifully after that cold snap that came through, and I hit Denver, and I couldn't ride my bike on 35th Avenue in Denver because the street was still covered with ice and snow. So I just want to recognize on the Wheat Ridge side, we were doing the right thing on 35th Avenue. So good work, Public Works. A couple other things. I heard from a resident today of District 2 who, you know, like many residents, is feeling frustrated with the construction on Wadsworth. And we recognize there's not much we can do, but I just want to recognize that the changes in traffic patterns are frustrating for a lot of people. And some of them are permanent and some are temporary. And I just want to recognize it's a long stretch. And when we're done, we will have a beautiful road, beautiful side paths, and I just appreciate people's patience. And I know it's especially hard on our businesses as those access points change. So really want to encourage people to support businesses along Wadsworth and 44th as traffic has a significant impact on them. To that end, the complaint was specifically about losing that westbound left turn into the First Bank sort of access road that goes through there. So I am wondering if the city is working with the owner of the parcel where Ross is located about access from Vance Street into that shopping center, because it is going to be pretty hard to get into all of that if you are coming from east of Wadsworth into. Is that something the state's working on?
Yes, Councilmember Halteen. Steve Art, our Economic Development Coordinator, and myself have been meeting with the management staff from the shopping center to try and get that roadway back open so that people, if they do turn on Vance, they can come through the parking lot and get over to First Bank and the other businesses along Watts. So we're working on that, hoping to have some resolution hopefully within the next several months here.
Okay, great. Thank you for that update. And then my last thing, I am hoping to get support from a co-counselor for us to bring forward a resolution in support of democracy. I think this is a time in our country where we need to just remind ourselves and to just reassure our community that democracy is something that we believe in and support here. So if I have support from another counselor, I'd like to add a democracy resolution. Thank you. And that's it for me tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor, and I would very much like to reinforce and repeat what my colleague, Councilman Snell, said about our orientation here. Wheat Ridge is it is a big, complex organization with lots of moving parts. I feel like I understand the moving parts a little better now, but I look forward to learning more, and all of the opportunities I've had to meet some of these really fine professional people working for the city. The other item I have is that within the last week, our city IT manager, Jesse Dubin, released a video on cybersecurity that is available to everybody, and I would highly recommend anybody that uses a computer or a smartphone, and it's probably everybody. Please go ahead and review that. There's some very good ideas, very good tips for how to keep yourself safe or safer online. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also have several items this evening. First, I'd like to recognize the Wheat Ridge Police Department and their diligent work in fighting crime in our community. They made an arrest in the Peter Damian case, which has been, a high-profile case in which a lot of our community has been following. And so I really appreciate their hard work and their transparency and their communication, because it really helps to build community, which is, a big part of their goal. I also am really excited for some of the Local Works events, including Live Local with Art Centric this Thursday, January 25th from 5 to 7 p.m. Love to see that we're highlighting local businesses, especially Art Centric on 38th. They've been a great addition to our community, so if you're available and can go check it out, please do that. The address is 7172 West 38th Avenue. Another really exciting piece of Local Works in District 4 on 44th is the Clear Creek Makerspace. So council is having an opportunity to tour that, and we're going to have several events coming up, including some meetings that Council Member Larson and I are planning on having a presence at, and hoping to connect and engage with District 4 residents. And then another really exciting thing to celebrate this Saturday, January 27th, is the Miller Homes Celebration. So those are the homes that were brought into our community by the Habitat for Humanity, and so they're going to house individuals that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford homes in our community. So it's a great addition to Wheat Ridge, District 4, and right over by two community schools in our area. So I really appreciate that, and lots to celebrate, not only in Wheat Ridge, but in District 4 as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Weaver.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to start out with a question regarding the person who called in at the beginning of the, just finished with stock show, so I was going to say, at the beginning of the show, at the beginning of the meeting regarding the Silver Bullet, and while I realize and respect that that is a business that I want to honor here in Wheat Ridge as a longtime business. I'm just kind of curious. I think that that's just a reality of new people moving in. It's also becoming more dense over there. And just what are some of the things that we might be able to do as new neighbors reach out to the city and have that issue, or is there some way that we can reach out and help with more insulation or whatever it may be at Silver
Sure.
Bullet?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Councilmember Weaver, we have been receiving more complaints in the last couple of years, more than I think we ever had. And as you mentioned, this business has been here for over 20 years.
Yeah.
So something's happened recently where I think we are seeing a lot of new people move into the neighborhood. So we've been working with them. It's a use by right, the shooting range. As I mentioned, it's been there for quite some time. We've been in conversations with them, the business owner, and right now what we're doing is they've agreed, the business, to for the city to come in and bring in an acoustical engineer to do an assessment of the building to determine what, if anything, could be done to hopefully damper some of the noise. So that's the steps that we are taking right now.
Great, thank you for that answer. And I certainly want to not attack them as a business at all. It's a business I have frequented in the past as well. So thank you that we can hopefully find a solution that will please everyone. what else? Stock show just ended. Some of you came out and saw me and, or didn't see me, but it was a great turnout. And I hope you all will all remember next summer, next January to come back out. I've put in a lot of volunteer hours in the last 10 days. So, but I just want to thank everybody who did come out, and we'll get more representation from Wheat Ridge in the coming years. So, thank you.
I hope you have some good heaters in your cowgirl boots.
It was cold. It was,
I'll bet.
yeah.
Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be attending the Makerspace tour on Wednesday, and I'm looking forward to it. I was there, I don't know, probably a couple months ago when it was in kind of rough shape, but I could see the vision, and I'm very excited, and hopefully our community will really support this, you know, from all different aspects. It's really interesting what they're doing and what they're doing with that space. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Love that Local Works is out supporting businesses and highlighting those businesses. We have a lot of great businesses here in Wheat Ridge. In fact, I missed our ribbon cutting at Third Shot Pickleball last week, which is one of the first ones I've missed in a long time. So I want to welcome them to Wheat Ridge and to District 3. The reason I missed last week is I was serving as foreman on a jury for Jeffco, and it was a 3-day trial. I really won't talk about the trial, but I really enjoyed being a part of that other side of government. You know, we're sitting here, we make laws, but actually see them carried out and get to see all that. It was really cool. And I think Jeffco does a pretty good job over there of running the court system and doing that. So I just wanted to say thank you to Jeffco for allowing me to take part in that last week, and welcome our new businesses to Wheat Ridge. And again, if you can find it, you should find it and buy it in Wheat Ridge.
Thank you. I did happen to make the ribbon cutting for Third Shot Pickleball. I'm glad to welcome them into our community. They had a full house when they opened up on Saturday, and it's a lot of enthusiastic people, and we're glad to have them here. I want to welcome our new Senior Deputy City Clerk, Marjorie Greer. Thank you so much for being here. We look forward to having you on our team. We've got a great staff, and I'm sure you'll be a great addition to that. We put a proclamation in place tonight for Black History Month, and I hope all of our citizens and residents will take an opportunity to learn more about the Black history in America and in Colorado. And we have a lot of people that live in Wheat Ridge, 33,000. So a lot of interesting that come from all different parts of the world. And I think we're a richer country, we're a richer city for having these folks in our community. Everyone has an opportunity to contribute to the life that we make here, and the life that we make is a better life because we all contribute and we allow others to contribute. So I want to recognize that. School is back in session. We've got kids that are hopefully getting some play and outdoors when the weather is nice, and even when it's cold, to get a taste of that. As you're driving around our city, please drive slowly and carefully. We want everyone to get home safely tonight and every night. So if there's no more business to come before the council, we will stand adjourned, and we will start in a few minutes on our special study session. Thank you. Ready? Good evening. I would like to call to order the special study session for the City Council for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for January 22nd, 2024. We have 2 items on our study session tonight. Item number 1 is the West 38th Avenue Street Improvement Project, Youngfield to Kipling Street, is item number 1. Item number 2 will be a review of the council rules of order and procedure. So we'll start with item number 1. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maria DeAndrea, our Public Works Director, will introduce this item.
Yes, thank you. So we're back to talk about the 38th West project. This is the segment between Youngfield and Kipling, and we've conducted some additional public engagement. Also in this last several months, we've moved some employees from our Community Development Department into the Public Works Department, creating a new CIP division. So that's why Mark Westberg is here tonight. He reports to Chad Phillips, who's our new CIP program manager, sitting in the front row here. And so we're hoping, and our goal is to deliver projects on time, on budget, and with a high level of quality. So this is our attempt to update you on the 38th West Improvements Project and talk about kind of next steps and where we go from here to stay within budget. With that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thanks. Yeah, so we're here to talk about our public engagement round 2, which happened during the month of October. Took us a little while to get all of our information compiled. As you'll see, we got a lot of response on this one. And just going to share that with you and then ask for some direction from council on our recommendation for moving forward. And someday I'll learn how to do this. So we presented 3 alternatives to the public in our second round of public engagement. Those alternatives all had several things in common, so I wanted to sort of highlight those first. They all had one travel lane in each direction with some left turns or roundabouts at higher capacity intersections. Even with the current traffic and even with factoring in all the future traffic up to 20 years from now, the 2 lanes will be plenty of travel lanes for the cars. So all of them have provided a dedicated space for people that walk, roll, and bike, basically all the non-cars that are on the road. I'm not sure where that came from. We also want to, I can guess, one of 2 people at either end of the podium up there. We also want to, they all will improve crossings. Now, the plans we showed the public didn't show those crossing locations because it will be something that will be common in all 3 alternatives. But we are going to improve crossings to make those safer. We're also going to need to add some curb and gutter and a storm sewer system with inlets and things to the street, because once you sort of fill up the ditches with sidewalks and other things, then you got to have a place to take all that water. So it's not just, yeah, that's another, I know, sorry. It is a thing in several locations. And all 3 alternatives had minimal to no right-of-way impact, meaning everything that we sort of planned will fit within the existing right-of-way. Now, there may be some places where it's right-of-way and people think it's their front yards, but in general, everything's within city right-of-way. Again, depending on where we land with left turns and roundabouts. This is going to be a rowdy meeting, isn't it? So alternative number 1 is what we call the north shared use path option. It basically has a wide shared use path, so a place for both bikes and peds and rollers and walkers. All those folks would share this common space, similar to what we have designed along Wadsworth on the east side of the current Wadsworth project. It would be a wider batch of concrete for all those people to share that space. And then on the south side of the road, there'd just be a sidewalk, just a regular sidewalk that's 5 to 7 feet wide, depending on what's out there already. Our goal will be to get at least 6 feet wide at any of the new locations. The second alternative is a real departure from the first. We just flopped the 2 and put the shared use path on the south side and put the sidewalk on the north side. So not a lot of difference between those 2. The third option is to put bike lanes on the street, and where space allows, we try to buffer those a little bit. You can see a little bit of a striped area there on the graphic. That would show, if possible, we try to buffer those bike lanes. We don't have any buffered bike lanes in the city yet. All of our bike lanes are immediately adjacent to the travel lanes. Again, depending on space and the location, how much traffic's going to be there, we look at trying to buffer some of those. And then on the sides, for all the folks that aren't rolling on bikes or scooters that travel faster, we'd have a place for those that want to go a little slower, the folks that are walking and pushing strollers and maybe riding on wheelchairs and things. So the round 2 of outreach, We had some focused outreach. We used to call these block-by-block meetings when we did some of our bigger projects like Wadsworth and stuff. This one was just focused. We basically invited everyone who was immediately adjacent to the corridor, whether they lived there or rented there or worked there or owned property there. We invited those folks to come in. We had over 30 people show up in early October for that meeting. Got some good feedback from the folks that showed up for that, because those are the folks that, if we do a project, would be most impacted. So we wanted to have just a session just for those folks. And then we did a park pop-up event. I believe it was Councilmember Hulteen's suggestion we do a park pop-up event on. We happened to schedule October 12th. Happened to be a very cold and windy day. We had 4 people show up. One guy showed up, and then a gal rode in on her bike with 2 little kids in tow, one on a little trailer and one on their own little bike, showed up in spite of the cold. So we were really thrilled that we actually had 4 people show up on that day. And then we had our open house event where we just invited the general public to that. And we had a little over 35 people show up for that one. And that was a lot like our first one, except that I gave a brief presentation, sort of real similar to what we're doing today, and talked about the alternatives, what the pros and the cons and those kind of things were. And then our What's Up Wheat Ridge website that we have was really highly visited. So we had over 300 people show up. We had almost 200 people actually fill out the survey, took the time to fill out the survey and give us some really nice feedback on what their thoughts were on things. In general, we had about half as many people show up in person for round 2, but like twice as many people responded on the surveys as what we had, or more than twice on this one. So we feel like we got a really good batch of feedback from the public on our round 2 outreach. So the stuff that sort of came out of round 2 was, in general, the comments were that people really like the idea of having separate travel modes by speed. And this is for not the cars. Those guys already have their own space, right? They've got the street. But the idea of having the bikes, maybe the sort of what I think of mid-speed folks, and then the slower speed folks having their own separate places, right? There's bike lanes versus sidewalks versus shared use paths. Another thing came about was regional connections. They'd really like to have a direct route to get to the rec center, to the shopping at either end, to the various places along the corridor, the schools and those kind of things. So there's a lot of comments about the regional connections around 38th, not so much on 38th. There were a lot of comments on maintaining the character of the street. They did not want it to look like Wadsworth, I believe was what one of the statements was that somebody made. So we're trying to be really sensitive to that and really preserve those existing trees. We've got a great tree canopy along 38th Avenue, just really close to the street in a lot of cases, right? So we don't want to preserve those, we want to preserve those existing trees as much as possible. Improved drainage, we heard that comment from several folks that showed up, in particular for the focus group, right? That were the people that live on the corridor whose yards are impacted by the fact things just don't drain very well at several locations. We have all those marked now. We think we got them all. Also, comments about traffic calming. There were a lot of concerns with how fast people drive on 38th West. So they really want to incorporate something that's going to help calm the traffic. And then there were a lot of comments, again, as there was in round 1, about undergrounding the overhead power lines. So those were all the things we had. In the votes, we sort of had people rank things, and in that ranking, number 1 and number 3 were the ones that were most preferred by the public. Depending on which outreach it was really close on all of them. On the online, which was the most of them, right, the 184 responses, it was dead even. It was a dead tie between the two. Number 2, which was the South Side shared use path, didn't rank nearly as highly. It was several percentage points below, and I think a lot of that, there were a lot of people that commented about if the wide thing was on the south side, it'd be harder to keep it clear of snow because of all the tree shade that it has. The north side, you've got the break because the street is going to get more snow on it, so it'd be easier to keep that clear. And maybe it's because more north side folks showed up and they didn't want the path on their, I'm not sure how that worked out. But now, so because those were sort of dead even, as staff looked at this, we had put together a little table that showed the 3 alternatives and a bunch of different engineering criteria and how we as engineers would rank those things and give them points, if you will. And number 3, which is the bike lane and sidewalk option, actually scored highest on that one. So we're sort of using that as a tiebreaker. And then there's a lot of other considerations we'll talk about in just a minute that also, from a staff standpoint, our recommendation would be to go with alternative number 3. So the thought would be to implement number 3, and it wouldn't be a bulldoze the street and start over. It would be, we'd implement it as needed, right? If we've already got a sidewalk there, there's no reason to tear out the existing sidewalk. As long as it meets all the current criteria. So it would be to provide continuous facilities for bikes and peds, preserve the existing sidewalks where they locate, and existing landscaping. If there's a landscaped, a sidewalk in the mini zone that a developer built fairly recently, we'd go ahead and keep that if we can, if it's not in the way of something else, and try to preserve all those things. So in the interest of that implementation, or implementation goals, you can't see that it says goal because I stuck this over here. Maybe I should put him somewhere else, and now I can't reach him. We're going to do this again. It's not going to move. It says implementation goals at the top of the slide. One of our big goals that we heard loud and clear from the public is to maintain the character of the corridor. And what that would mean is preserve as much of that existing infrastructure as we can. If we've got sidewalks and landscaping and things like that that are already there and working, there's no reason to take those things out. We really want to try to preserve those existing trees. You know, it makes no sense to take down a bunch of really big mature trees to plant a bunch of smaller trees just to have that amenity zone in there. If we've already got the big tree there, let's just preserve it and keep it. And then limit the right-of-way use. Not just limit sort of needing more right-of-way, but even within our existing right-of-way, try to limit the use of what we're using just to save costs and reduce the impacts on the neighbors that are there. And I clicked off of this again now. So only provide lighting at key areas. So, you know, at the two ends where we've got commercial corridors, within that commercial areas, we provide that ped lighting and the street lighting, maybe around any schools or parks or things like that. But in general, a lot of this is residential, right? So we wouldn't add the ped lighting like what we're adding along Wadsworth, and we've added on some other corridors. And then street lighting mostly at intersections to help light those up to make those safer to navigate. So not a whole scale sort of we're going to make the corridor glow kind of project, but just really emphasize the areas that we need to have that pedestrian lighting to help people feel safer at that particular location. Limit the amenities that we're doing sort of between the sidewalk and the curb just to help reduce future costs and current costs. I know that in the 2J proposal that was presented to council, this project was at like $25 million for construction costs, another $2.5 million for engineering and design. That's a big ticket item. So we're hoping to, by doing some of these things, still have a great project that still maintains the character of the corridor, but comes in a much lower cost than what that was. Add some traffic calming and crossing improvements. Some of that goes hand in hand, right? If we add some crossing improvements, sometimes it helps with the traffic calming and those things. So we hope to get those things added. And this is the point where I should have said pause at the bottom. We want to pause, and this is the part where we'd like to get direction from council on moving ahead with what staff is recommending, which is alternative 3, the bike lanes and sidewalks. Moving ahead with that, implementing as we need on the corridor to help make a continuous facility. So I'll stop talking for a bit, and you guys can ask questions or offer comments or whatever it is you want to do.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll open it up to questions or comments from staff or from council. Who's going first? Councilor Weaver.
Thank you, Mark. I love this. I love option 3. I think that's fantastic. And if you can bring the cost down and use some of the newer infrastructure that's along there, I think that's fantastic. Because most of the new sidewalks are relatively new, I believe in the last 10 years, yes? And I guess my question would be, I have heard a lot of different things about the undergrounding idea of, and I know people would really like to see utilities undergrounded. I've also heard that it's not possible, and it's an Excel thing, and it just, and that it would just be prohibitive. So could you just speak to that a little bit, and if, right, like, is that a thing we want to try and do? Or, I don't know anything about it. I've just heard lots of different things, so I'll be quiet.
So undergrounding is definitely possible, right? It's just whether it's the best use of the city's. So let me back up just a second. As we do this project, if any of the existing utility poles are in the way, then Excel has to move those at their cost. If we want them moved underground, then that differential becomes our cost. And we have a fund with them we call our 1% fund, because 1% of your bill goes towards this fund. And that is, we hoard that for a while, and then we use it on a project. I think the last time we used it was on Youngfield, there along the Applewood Shopping Center, which really cleaned up that corridor and made it look great, right? Really getting all those overhead lines. Certainly removing the overhead lines from this corridor would really change the appearance of this corridor, but it's a mile and a half, a mile and 3/4 actually, and it would not be inexpensive to do. And whether it's the best use of the city's funds or whether the city should use those funds somewhere else, that is all much higher above my pay grade. But all things are possible. It just, like most things, costs money.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Hulteen.
Oh my gosh, I've been waiting so long for this. So excited. Having been working on the initial studies of the corridor and just really having a just deep understanding of the need for that corridor to work for people who aren't in a car as well as in a car. So I've got a couple of things. First of all, I strongly support option number 3. When we create situations where we're putting bicyclists and pedestrians together, it makes it not safe for either of them. In that corridor in particular, we'd really love to see, kids walking to school and walking to the parks and walking to the rec center. So I think separating the uses is going to be, encourage more biking, walking, and rolling. One of my neighbors has been taking one of those little fold-up scooters to his work in Arvada every day. So I'm seeing some of my neighbors not on the scooter shares, but actually using scooters for transportation. So I think keeping the uses separated will encourage the uses and help everyone feel safe. You were talking about the plans for lighting and not lighting the corridor up. Are you including the transit stops for the lighting?
Yeah, most of those transit stops occur near intersections, and so we tried to double up using those street lights, not a ped light, but a street light that would both illuminate the intersection and the transit stop. We could certainly look at adding an auxiliary ped light if we needed to, just for the transit stop. If that area is a little farther away or something, we can certainly, that's one of those targeted areas, right, to make people feel safer waiting at that stop for the bus to come.
Okay. And then you didn't mention this. I mean, you say traffic calming. As you know, I don't need to tell you, the new MUTCD is out, and it includes more guidance on speed limit reductions and not using the 85th percentile for setting the speed limit. So, the speed limit on that corridor is 35, and as it is right now, I think the thing we could do very quickly is reduce the speed limit on that corridor, and I'd like us to take a look at that. But similar corridors in other cities are at 25 or 30, and with just the tightness of that corridor, and with so many families and the cars coming in and out, we can take advantage of the new guidance from the MUTCD and use more flexibility to reduce the speed limit on that corridor. And then the last thing is, would this project be eligible for an art project? Would this corridor project be getting some art?
I believe our city code requires us to contribute funds, 1% of what the construction costs are towards art. Patrick probably is better able to answer this one.
Nope, that's correct. 1% of the project's construction costs.
Okay.
Yep.
And then would that art be on the corridor?
Yeah, that'd be up to our public art policy lays out the process of setting up a committee, and we have an art consultant that helps with that process, and that committee chooses kind of where the art goes and what it will look like, and the cultural commission's also involved in that.
Okay, but generally, like, it would go in around the corridor somewhere?
Oh, yeah. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
that's,
Yeah, within the
Yeah.
project area.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, I think that is exciting. And then the last thing, I know that we're trying to work around a bunch of constraints here, fiscal constraint being the leading one. But also, in the interest of preserving trees, would you look anywhere at possibly going behind trees for a detached sidewalk if it was the right thing to do? Because there's some places along there where there's kind of that weird sidewalk-ish material. But is that something you guys would look at to preserve trees, would be to detach the sidewalk and divert it back a little bit?
With the plans that we prepared for the second round of outreach, everything looked like it was in enough that we could maybe wiggle the road in a couple of places and maybe avoid some trees and avoid hitting the roots and stuff. It's not just missing the tree, it's missing the root system also in a really thoughtful way. So we can certainly look at all of those things. If we end up wandering outside of our existing right-of-way, that gets a little dicier. Especially if that sidewalk-ish thing is not in right-of-way or in an easement or something else, it makes the project a lot more complicated. My hope right now is that we can just have everything right in there, nice and tight, and if we've got to wiggle a little bit here and there to try to miss some trees, we've probably got the room to do that.
Okay. All right, great. Well, I am excited and support staff's recommendation for number 3, and I'm excited to see the ground break on that.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. I too definitely support option 3 as a cyclist, having that separated. As I've gone on the Clear Creek Trail, there's always a lot of different types of bicycles, different people, and but the situation is different there because there's no driveway curb cuts, and so along 38th there, I would feel safer as a cyclist if I wasn't having to go up and over all these different curb cuts for residential. And then as far as trees, I do have concerns over to what extent that we try to preserve the trees. I hope that there'll be some type of assessment and that some type of valuation based on, is the tree like a green ash, and is it susceptible to EAB, or is it a weak wood tree? Is the tree something on our city tree list? And so, those are the types of trees that we value, and not some of these weak wooded trees. And then as far as like what you mentioned, some of these huge trees have really big canopies, a very vast root system, and cutting, through a third or potentially half of the root system, it's going to kill the tree anyway. And so there has to be a lot of consideration of how we could realistically save that tree and or go around it. And then my last comment is I would really encourage the city to consider using roundabouts, if at all possible. I don't know if that's something that'd be in the budget, but I would much prefer to see some type of roundabout to help kind of slow down the traffic, because right now it's just kind of a thoroughfare, unless there's a light that goes on at the Louise Turner Park, it's pretty much a straight shot. I'd rather see the money used for something like that than trying to underground the overhead utilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. As a new member of the council, I was not here for a lot of the early discussions of this, and I understand the train is pretty much left the station at this point, but I do have a few more backward-looking questions. How did the project come about? Was there some sort of a survey, or where did the idea for this project come from?
So maybe Councilmember Hilteen wants to answer, but there was the shorter answer is that there's been a lot of activity on 38th West for 15 plus years, where there's been little studies, little things happen. Local Works actually helped us with something. Kaiser helped fund a thing. But when we were doing our Let's Talk, if you're familiar with our Let's Talk program, we were doing the Let's Talk. One of the big things that came up in the neighborhood that encompasses 38th, and there's a couple of neighborhoods in there, was do something for bikes and peds on 38th. That rose to the top of a lot of those discussions. And so that was the impetus behind us actually adding this to the budget last year. It wasn't originally budgeted for 23. And so council approved adding this at $600 and some odd thousand to have us do this study so we can set ourselves up for the next step by having this conceptual plan, a conceptual cost estimate, all those things in place.
And just to add to that real quickly, Mr. Larson, it's been a point of discussion ever since I've been here for 22 some years. People have talked about 38th and just improving the accessibility and the walkability. We actually we put it on the ballot at least once, many, many years ago, to ask voters to approve, I think, a sales tax increase maybe to help fund it, but it didn't pass back then. So it's been a discussion for a very, very long time from your residents.
Okay, my next question is, as you were preparing this, or part of maybe the engineering study, typically you do a traffic count on a road improvement. Was there a count of bicycles and pedestrians?
We did some of that. Right now, there's no place for them to really be except the shoulder. So we didn't think that was gonna, we did with what they were, the way did the counts, they were able to gather some information on bikes and peds. And I think they also looked at Stravia, I want to say it is. I'm probably wrong. Maybe that's the right thing, where people can allow themselves to be tracked, and there was a lot of activity showing up there on 38th West. Certainly from all the public comments we've received in the last 2 rounds of outreach, we've had a lot of comments about, I'd love to bike or walk this corridor, I just don't feel safe doing it, right? So I think this will be one of those build it and they will definitely come situations.
Okay, and then just one more, and we may want to come back to this, but, and again, I understand the trains left the station. The voters in Wheat Ridge just approved 2J, and that money is to be, some of the bond money that's raised is to be earmarked for bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and I'm assuming this would come out of that. But the preliminary number that was in the memo was 25 million, which would be 1/3 of 2J. And when I think of some of the other projects around, especially around stormwater and floodplain management and that sort of thing, and how expensive those projects are, I get a little concerned that if you take 1/3 of all that money and devote it to a single project, some of the other ones may be neglected.
And that's the reason why we're not sort of taking the bulldozer approach. You know, with Wadsworth, we sort of had to just take everything out that was along there, in most cases, and rebuild everything new. We would not use that approach here. This would be a very targeted approach. So we're gonna keep our 2 travel lanes in there. We're gonna need to add some asphalt in places to get the bike lanes in, and then we definitely have to add storm sewer and sidewalks in places to get those in. Right, but there's a fair amount of existing sidewalk at the 2 ends already. There's some in the middle of where there's some of the newer developments have been. Even some of the developments that happened 20 or 30 years ago before I started here put sidewalks in. So we're gonna try to keep as much of that as possible, and by doing really targeted lighting and only doing the things we sort of need to at the places we need to. Anything that's existing, we're gonna try to preserve. I think we can definitely do this we hope for a lot less than $25 million. Because we see that that's 1/3 also. It's a big number.
It is. And just one other thing, when we talk about there's existing drainage ditches there now that would be enclosed in some sort of culvert setup. Would you have to do a whole lot of additional engineering to get somewhere for that water to go?
So we have 2 discharge points already on the corridor at, I want to say it's Tabor. It's one of those T words. When we used to call it Dowd Overlook, it's called Fireside now. The Fireside subdivision, when they came in, we had them upsize the pipe that they have heading north from 38th Avenue, because that's one of our existing drainage problem areas. They put in the infrastructure to sort of take everything from there west, north, and then down the hill towards the creek. So that's one place where we've got it. The other place things will discharge is going to be Lena Gulch at the east end. So those are really the only 2 places that we can send water. So that's where we'll have those targeted places that we're gonna have the storm sewer connect to either the gulch or to the existing storm sewer that we upsized at city cost back in the day, 15 years ago or so, when Fireside was built.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mark. So from a cost and value engineering standpoint, I completely understand why staff would be recommending alternative 3, although I did prefer either alternative 1 or 2. I was kind of leaning towards 2, except for the snow melt reality. That's a really good point. So I think one of our top priorities on this project is safety for those on bikes and walking. And I'm not much of a cyclist. When I do ride a bike, it's on Clear Creek Trail. And as a motorist, however, I do have concerns with bikes in the streets oftentimes, even if there's bike lanes, and particularly when it involves children, which we have recognized that this is going to be a safe route to school. And so some of those bike and peds or individuals using this would be students and families. And for me, like, it makes more sense in my mind to have a shared use path, even though that might be more costly. It just kind of like future thinking, particularly with the increased students at Prospect Valley that are likely having to commute longer routes from that neighborhood. I really would prefer a shared use path. I know some of our more avid cyclists have spoken differently, and maybe if you have some more information in that regard, from a safety standpoint, alternative 1 or 2 makes the most sense in my mind.
We did talk to some parents that had the same concern you had with having the bike lane option. And what we discussed with them was, well, there's nothing stopping you as a parent from being in the bike lane, your kids being on the sidewalk next to you versus being on something where they're stretched out behind you. And they actually kind of liked that option because they could keep their eye on them a little better because they're right there versus sort of being around them or behind them even. So that was one of the things we talked about with parents, such as yourself that aren't type A cyclists, that they could be in the bike lane, certainly moving slower than they would be otherwise, but the kids could still be in the sidewalk. Because there's a bike lane doesn't preclude folks from riding on the sidewalk. That's still allowed. And, kids going to school on bikes might be riding closer to the speeds that people are walking versus people like myself that would be on the street doing 10 to 15 miles an hour.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Westbrook, I had just a couple of questions. Where we'll be able to look for some more money on this project? Is the drainage, would we be able to go to the Mile High Flood District and seek some funding, or are there other grants that we might be able to acquire for this project?
As you know, I'm a bit of an opportunist. So one of the things that we're producing with this study is what's called an OSP, an outfall system plan, which is basically a little bit of a conceptual drainage plan on steroids. It's got a little more information on it. We're doing that to Mile High Flood District standards so that if they have money at the time that we're doing this, in theory, they could pay for half of the storm sewer costs, up to half of the storm sewer costs, assuming that their budgets align with our timing and all those kind of things. So we are doing that, and 38th, all of 38th through the city is actually on DRCOG's, the region's RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan. So it's eligible for TIP funds, the Transportation Improvement Funds that we've been very successful at getting. I said all of 38th is on that plan. The 38th East, should that project move forward, is going to score a lot higher because it's a denser area, it's our downtown. It's next to the Wadsworth Urban Center, which scores a lot of points when you're doing TIP applications. So in theory, we could get a TIP grant for 38th West, but I think we'll be much more successful getting one for 38th East, which would help defray the cost of that project.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like option number 3 as well, and I was at one of the meetings and got a chance to talk to some of the people there. And my one question is, how much will we have as far as sway with RTD about maybe moving some of those bus stops now that Color Strand's not a school anymore? I know there's like a bus stop right at 38th and Ward. And I've talked with Mr. Goff about maybe moving that across the street, because right now it's in front of somebody's house. And if we moved it across the street, it'd be in front of a church, which is probably a much better way to go. And then maybe moving one of the westbound ones down a little bit so that it's maybe not in front of somebody's house, but actually closer to the retail development.
That was one of our comments from the residents was, can you consolidate bus stops because now people will be able to walk to them?
Right.
So yeah, we will definitely work with RTD as we move forward with the design. They've been involved, they've been a stakeholder, they did our stakeholder walk with us, and we saw the wide variety of stops along the corridor. We're going to try to make those a lot more uniform and better at all locations, right? At least have a bench or something there for people to sit on. So our hope would be that we would try to consolidate some of those and have those a little more strategic based on, population density and those kind of things. They've got a lot of stops on 38th West right now. So our hope would be that we try to consolidate some of those down and maybe be, like you said, a little more thoughtful with what they're next to. So yeah, we can certainly look, that'll be something we'll be looking at as we move forward with the conceptual design.
Okay, great. And I live right over here. My kids and I, we walk and bike all over that place, and they go to Prospect Valley now, which means that's one alternative for us to get over to that school. And I agree that like a multi-use path feels safer, but I think in this case, a lot of what we do is we just ride in the bike lane and we have them ride on the sidewalk. And given the cost savings to that, the alternative, I think that that makes the most sense. I think that we have enough support, so I'm going to go ahead and ask for consensus.
Before you
Can
do
we-
that, I've
okay.
got a couple
You have more
but
questions? Okay.
Counselor Snell hasn't had an opportunity, and then Counselor Hulteen had her hand up also. Counselor Snell.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I do have a little bit of a history with this corridor as well. I think option 3 is wonderful. I'm excited for the first buffered bike lane in Wheat Ridge. But I do think it was, of course, Wheat Ridge wouldn't have done it any other way, but to make sure that the residents have time to have input. I know that we have our housing options along that corridor run the gamut. We have multifamily homes, we have single-family homes, I said multifamily dwellings, apartment complexes. We have kiddos, riding bikes, trying to get to the park and rec center and things like that. So I just appreciate all the work that's been done to get to this point. Thank you. Kudos to you and your team and everyone working on it. And I do think option 3 is going to be great. So thank you.
And I guess in the interest of full disclosure, Councilmember Snell was on our stakeholder walk with us back in the day before she was on council, so she's been there.
I should have disclosed that. Thank you, Mark.
No, it's all right.
And Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you. So I want to just sort of respond to a couple of points that have been made. When we talk about the multi-use lanes, we're talking about bikes and pedestrians. But one of the things, as someone who rides their bike a lot on multi-use, like the Clear Creek, is a lot of pedestrians have dogs and have dogs on leashes. And I'll tell you what, it's the dogs that actually make it really hard to ride a bike on a multi-use trail. People have their extender leashes going all the way across, and it's actually really dangerous for everybody in those situations. So when I'm on my bike on a multi-use trail, I really can't go more than 5 or 6 miles an hour, and it can be kind of precarious. So with the adoption of e-bikes in Colorado, having e-bike rebates available for all Colorado residents starting April 1st this year, really giving bicyclists a place to ride. I ride 20 to 24 miles an hour on my e-bike when I'm going. And if I can do that safely on a road and I want to get there directly because I'm doing it instead of riding a car, you don't want me on the sidewalk. I'm dangerous. I am dangerous, people. Just look at me. And I think as a practice as the city, other than our main arterials, separating our bikes and peds is really in the best interest for the safety for everybody. I understand when we're on an arterial, we don't necessarily want to put our bicyclists next to 45-mile-an-hour traffic, but the way to make it safer for everyone, including people who are behind a wheel who don't want to hit a bicyclist, is to make sure drivers aren't going over 30 miles an hour, ideally on the corridor. So I just want to kind of speak to that. And then I just want to speak a little bit to the need. So actually, Councilmember Snell and I together worked on the initial study from Activate 38, which was the grant Local Works got from Kaiser to study the corridor. And the reason they got that grant is because there is no other way to get from Kipling to Youngfield except for on 44th and 32nd and 38th. There are no through streets. And so if you live on that corridor and you want to get out of the neighborhood and get to any destination, like a school, shopping, the hospital, you have to go on 38th Avenue. So it's a forced travel corridor. And having done this study, Councilmember Snell and I actually went out and did intercept surveys. We spent several days just walking the corridor and talking to people who lived on the corridor. And there were so many, first of all, it was shocking how many people we ran into who had been hit or knew somebody who had been hit. We talked to kids who lived on the north side of the street who could see Louise Turner Park from their complex's parking lot, and their parents wouldn't let them go to the park. So when we talk about access on that corridor, it's not because it's great to get bikes and peds out. It's because on that corridor, there are a lot of people who are disproportionately dependent on transit walking and biking to get where they need to go. We've got kids that aren't accessing the parks that are in the neighborhood or able to get to school. So by really investing in this safety, we're actually addressing a real transportation need, a community health need, and it's something that we have some just really powerful stories from neighbors there, that the lack of safe sidewalks and bike lanes negatively impacting like their access to our community that a lot of us enjoy in our neighborhood. So I'm pretty passionate about the project and excited to see it.
Okay, before we go to consensus, Councilor Dozeman has a quick comment, and then I want to go to Director DeAndrea.
Thank you. Can you just speak to the components of the cost estimates? Because looking at the conceptual cost estimate of $2.4 million for design, I mean, that seems really excessive. So maybe speak to what all that entails, and then maybe what the more expensive components of the $24 million for the actual construction, and how accurate you think that is, or are we going to be?
I wasn't involved in the preparation of those for the
Okay.
2J stuff. That was the Director Andrea was.
Yes.
I think Maria was going to cover that in her
Sure.
closing comments, so.
Yes, so if you recall, when we were talking about 2J as an action that came out of the retreat, once we kind of narrowed down the focus of the projects, we went back with a different consulting firm to get very rough cost estimates. And those range, because again, we're probably at about 10% on many of these projects, 10% complete, if that, to get kind of a range of cost estimates. So 27 million for this project assumed full lighting, full street reconstruction, full drainage, kind of the full package. So from here, but that had also had plus or minus 30% on it. So 27 million represents that midpoint. So it could be, you know, anywhere higher and lower than that. So our intent before the next round of public meetings, which will be held in a few months, would be to provide a better cost estimate. So now that we're able to focus on more of one option that we'll bring back to the public again to get more specific feedback, then we'll provide a better cost estimate for people and for council to see. We'll also be getting, we'll talk to Excel at least to get a rough cost estimate of what it would cost to underground the overhead, just so we have that number and see if we can make that work. But that would be the intent. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see if we can go for a consensus to move forward with staff recommendations with option number 3 and some of the cost-cutting measures in there as well.
Looks like we have a consensus on that. Thank you. Mr. Westberg, you have some more presentation.
Just a couple more slides on
Just
next
a
steps. This will go
couple more
really
slides.
fast, I promise. So the next big step from a traffic standpoint is finalize where those left turn lanes, dedicated left turn lanes or roundabouts. We've added roundabouts as an option. And there's even a chance that maybe, you know, we have the only traffic signal on 38th West is at Parfit. Maybe there's a chance we could replace that traffic signal with a roundabout at that location and not have that ongoing maintenance cost of having that traffic signal equipment there. So roundabouts are on the list, sir. Adding bike lanes, keep those existing sidewalks everywhere we possibly can. Our big focus is going to be on closing those sidewalk gaps. Adjust elements to minimize impact. So, you know, we might have buffered bike lanes in some places, but other places we might not have buffered bike lanes. If that's going to cause a big impact, to add that couple of feet, we may not do that. And our big thing coming out of this at the end is hopefully going to be a conceptual cost estimate so we can help inform how we're moving forward with this project and the rest of our potential 2J projects. So our next round of outreach is going to be this summer. We've got to get through all this design and that kind of stuff, get our OSP approved by Mile High Flood District, do all those things. We'd hope to come back in early fall, late summer, early fall, to council to actually adopt this as our plan for the corridor. And the goal there is that if someone else does come in and redevelop there, they would be required to implement their part of the plan if it's feasible. If not, we'd have them do a fees in lieu for their part of the plan. So that would which is what's happened on the newer developments. They've actually implemented some parts of those plans. And just a reminder of what 38th looks like today. So
Okay.
If you have any more questions or comments, we can field those. If not, we'll move on and you guys can talk about rules.
Okay, I think we've had a pretty good discussion on this. Mr. Westberg, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And with that,
Thanks, Mark.
we will move to our study session agenda item number 2. This is a review of council rules and procedures. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you all know, City Council, you have your own rules of order and procedure that you have, councils before you and yourselves have written and adopted over the years. Part of the rules say that they can be amended by discussion of council, and that's why we're here this evening. First of all, to see if there's any general amendments you'd like to make, but this year specifically, city attorney has put together a memo that you've all seen addressing hate speech in a public forum and what options that you may have as city council with your rules. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Dahl. We'll cover that piece, and if you have any, I didn't receive any suggested amendments to any parts of the other rules, but if there are any, we can discuss that after Mr. Dahl's done with his part.
Terrific. Just a couple of points to add to the, pardon me, add to the memo that you have from me dated November 28th. The public's right to speak portion of the meeting is a limited public forum, so you have opened it up. You're not required to open up that forum. As I mentioned in the memo, there's no entitlement to the public being able to speak during a council meeting except during a noticed public hearing. And I've gone on to say that it is, I won't say it's universal in the state, but very widespread in the state that not only do councils allow comment on individual agenda items, but also an open mic kind of setting. And that is the public's right to speak option that you have, and many cities do have. Once you have opened that up, you have opened it up to whatever people want to say, with some actually few limitations. As I mentioned, it's those are limitations that can't limit the content of the speech. That's a very high bar, as I mentioned in the memo, and it's very difficult to find a kind of speech that you would have the right to limit as to content. So instead, what's available to you as limitations are time, place, and manner restrictions. It's the same kind of restriction, interestingly, that the city has to apply to its sign code. When we've revised the sign code now several years ago to make sure there are no content embedded items in the sign code, such that you would have to read the sign, in order to know how it's regulated. And we took all that out and replaced it with a system that regulates signs basically by sign type. So you don't have to read the sign to know that it's a yard sign or a wall sign or a roof sign or a pennant sign, et cetera, and you can regulate them that way. As translated to your public's right to speak, you have similar time, place, and manner restrictions, but not content. 3 minutes. 2 speakers may sign up to donate their time to another speaker for a total of 9. These are time, place, and manner restrictions. When do you have the comments? At the beginning of the meeting. As I've pointed out in the memo, and it's really probably just the first 6 or 8 numbered items on the second page of the memo, these are things that you could add or change to some degree, if you wish, in your public's right to speak requirements, if the concern is to kind of contain the amount of the kind of speech that you're getting. It may be unnecessary or not, but the ones I think that are probably the most likely to be effective and still not unnecessarily limit people's access to the forum, and especially your residents' access to the forum, which is, I absolutely understand what the council wants to be able to preserve, while at the same time limiting improper use of the forum. And that would be things like sign-in requirements, which we do have in the back, but those in other cities can be enhanced. You've got to sign in before a certain time, for example. Identification requirements I put in here. Those are a little trickier to enforce, honestly, but, and I'm not sure, other than saying, please identify yourself, that you should go any further than that. Certainly time limitations, and many cities allow less time than 3 minutes. 3 minutes can be pretty long, depending upon what's going on. Total time for public comment. We've got an hour, or we've got 35 minutes at the beginning. If it's more than that, you're going to have to, the remaining persons have to wait to the end. City of Boulder, I think, a few months ago, had public comment on an item, it wasn't Zoom bombed, that lasted 2 hours worth of public comment. These were all regular citizens that showed up on a given item up there. So you have the right to, again, limit that. What is that? That's a time, place, or manner restriction, wholly unrelated to content. As I mentioned, you could move it to the end of the meeting. The rest of the notes, beginning with about number 6, are more stringent. Restrict public comment just to agenda items, eliminating anything you want to speak on. Tonight, there was a speaker, as you know, that was on an item not on the agenda, but one of interest. And so that would hurt that person. That's not a content restriction, but nevertheless, it really would restrict that right. And the other items in the list are even more restrictive, and I'm happy to speak about them. You might consider eliminating the right to donate time. That I think over the years, that isn't used very often, and when it is, I think it's not that helpful, and it gets abused a little bit. That's one that I think could probably go away and people won't even notice it, really. So I'm sure there may be comments or questions, happy to answer them on the sort of content speech part of this. The rest of the rules, as you know, are procedural and really do benefit from a look by the council after a couple of years. We think we've got it all tuned up and perfect. And a couple of years goes by and magically there are some things that our experience has taught us could lend themselves to change. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dahl. Do we have discussion right now? Mayor Pro Tem Stites and then Councilor Bozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, when I was growing up, I watched a lot of city council meetings. Oddly, like more than the average kid my age. You know, it was one way for me to see my grandfather and my uncle Kent, and then obviously my dad and whatnot. But my favorite part was always public comment, right? Because they told those idiot city councilors what they do. So I really enjoyed that. So I don't want to restrict that as much as possible. The one thing, and I spoke to a couple of councilors over the last week, that I think that we could do away with is the donation of time. I agree with Mr. Dahl. Anytime I've seen it done, it's never helpful. It doesn't take 6 minutes or 9 minutes to say what you need to say. Usually I think you can get it done in 3 minutes. And I think it actually serves the people more to even just get up individually and say, ditto, I agree with what he just said, and do that, just because it does show that support for that statement. So I think getting number, I think it was 11, that's probably the only one that I would see us implement. I would like to see us look maybe again in another year about Zoom comment, but I do like the restrictions we put in recently with having people sign up before the meetings, things like that. It's not that I want to limit people from being able to access us, but we've had a lot of issues, technology issues, people not being able to unmute themselves and speak. And it, specifically the last meeting, we had 3 or 4 of them kind of in a row where it was just very disruptive to the meeting, not from what they were saying, just technology. So I would like to kind of move forward with what we have now with the sign up and all that, but maybe in a year, if we're still having those same issues, maybe go back and relook at it, because we do have a way for people to access us through Wheat Ridge Speaks, right? So they can still give comments even though they're not here. So I'll see what everybody else has to say, but thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question about the number 13 rebroadcasting. Can that retroactively be applied, or is that November 13th meeting and the comments made being broadcasted currently?
Pardon me, there's 2 things going on here. One is the rebroadcast, which happens pretty quickly, as I understand it. So that's probably already taken place. It remains a recording of the city council proceedings. It remains an open record that anyone can come and ask for a copy of. So the only thing 13 really addresses is the obligation to rebroadcast or not, or your options around whether to rebroadcast. And I think that ship has sailed, if I'm not mistaken. It's been, what, 2 months now? Right?
We did not rebroadcast.
Oh, we didn't? Okay.
We are not rebroadcasting that specific evening when the comments were made.
And you have the right to do that. That's your speech, which you recorded and then chose to speak. And then it becomes yours, and you can choose whether to broadcast it or not. I think, as I mentioned in the memo, if that's the choice made, I'd not rebroadcast any of the public comment in that, because, as you can tell, I'm just conservatively aware of and being careful around choosing to rebroadcast everything but, Mr. X's speech, then you realize, I think you're choosing that based on content. And while I can make an argument on your behalf that, yes, that's true, but it's our speech when we rebroadcast it, therefore we can regulate content, I'm not that happy about being in front of a district court judge making that, tiptoeing through the tulips like that. I'd rather say we chose not to rebroadcast any of the public comment in that meeting, and I think that's more solid. But am I answering your question?
Yes, and that was actually, you answered my next question as well, as far as like if it would be all of public comment or specific comments made. Is it able to be edited so that it's, just removing the content of whatever was said during public comment and then leaving all of the rest of council business?
Yes, I think you can rebroadcast, having deleted that, for the rebroadcast.
So it is possible to edit and broadcast or rebroadcast like the
rest of the meeting.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Rome.
Thank you, Mayor. The first question I have on 13 is, what do you mean by on the last sentence, it says best to not broadcast any of the Republic comment? Is that meant to be public?
Yes, it's really the same question just asked. When I said public comment, I really meant, Republic, yes, that's a typo.
Okay.
Should be public.
Yeah. I would be in favor, though, of, yes, not rebroadcasting any public comment. The beginning of that, of not rebroadcasting that. The public comment, not rebroadcasting it. Yeah, not at all, if we had a choice. Just,
Well, the default,
I think, I'd be fine with all, just the public of all meetings. Just the non-agenda public comment.
We're not currently doing it for every meeting. We just did it for that one meeting.
Okay.
But it is quite a bit of work to edit it out for every meeting. It's something we can do if you want, but
Okay.
if you want to speak to that.
Does that create a constitutional question? Because now we're going to only edit out certain meetings?
yeah, in the rebroadcast arena, it becomes the government speech. And my argument is we can do whatever we want on our government speech. We can broadcast this time and not that time, and that speaker and not that speaker. But the point you make is a good one. Under the theory of, well, what are you really trying to do here? And let's look at what got broadcast and what didn't. And you've got a history of broadcasting things that you like and not rebroadcasting things you don't. I'd be concerned about that. So on balance, I would prefer to have a rule that says we would either always rebroadcast the public comment or none of it. My feeling about this, honestly, is this may lend itself to something you put in your back pocket because you may not have a need to be that concerned about the broadcasting of public's right to speak again for some time. If it happens once a year that you regret that those things got said and got rebroadcasted, that's really not a big price to pay for the freedom of speech that we have and the sort of no restrictions without having to defend your actions that we probably could, but why? And at what cost? And I guess my counsel on this would be, I gave you the law, but I think I would be inclined not to use some of these tools that are more harsh, that are like in the last half of the memo, until you find that you've got a problem that is inescapable and you have to do something more.
Thank you.
Yeah, I still have one more comment. And then also, I would be in support of deleting the yielding additional time that Mayor Pro Tem just stated. I just feel like everybody, can say their 3 minutes and not yielding and building that and building that and building that. And then my last thing is I really like the effort that's been put into this, that I feel like we have a lot of tools, a lot of options, and that there's flexibility. you know, for the mayor and council to look at this and make some decisions. It's not just black and white. There's a lot of tools, and thank you for that.
Thank you. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple things. I definitely support getting rid of the donating time. So support that. Let's hear, I have a couple of comments on different things. So I do support the Zoom. I think it's hard for us to take the Zoom comment away once we've offered it. People don't use it often, and we have technical glitches in here. I've watched Patrick struggle with that screen a lot, right? Like technical glitches are Patrick and others. Maybe Patrick's the one who figures it out. Anyway, like there's a lot of technology in this room that we actually struggle with. It's an issue. And I don't feel like we've had a lot of issues with Zoom. So in general, I'd like to have parity around that. And one of the parity things is I do like that we are requiring people to let us know on Zoom, like register in advance and let us know what they're going to talk about. And I would like to see maybe that same parity in person if we're going to require that online. I've kind of have a softness in my heart for the coming in at the last minute and having your say, but some of this is also just how we conduct the meeting with being able to know who's here and what they're talking about. And some of the other suggestions in here, on the rare nights, we've had very few of them since I've been seated, where we do have a lot of people here to give testimony. You know, maybe if we're requiring people to sign in, it gives the mayor or Mayor Pro Tem the option at the beginning of the meeting to exercise to say, we will do 30 minutes worth of public comment. And if you wish to give public comment after we get through that 30 minutes, you can stay to the end. But if we're requiring sign-ins at the beginning, we can administer the meeting better at the front, so that we can not get hijacked, whether it's virtually or I don't want to say hijacked in person, but just conducting the meeting in a way that's respectful of both the business that we conduct in a meeting and our community's right to speak and be heard. And I agree, the public rights to speak is the best. Another thing on here that I think restricting to spoken comment to me seems important too. There have been a couple times where people have come in and given like presentations as public comment, and have we had songs? I don't know. Maybe I did one once, but I do remember it was actually during the rezoning off of Everett and 38th, where they came in and he had like he put his thumb drive in and gave a presentation during public comment. And I just think that is sort of disadvantages people who are here just with their words. So I would consider limiting the spoken comment. And as Mayor Pro Tem Stites was talking, it reminded me this morning I was at Stylus and Crate, and I ran into 3 of our police officers, and I always thank them for their service, and was chatting with them a little bit. And one of them was like, "Oh, I watch city council meetings." And I was like, wow, that's really awesome. Like in his spare time, he's watching city council meetings, and he's like, well, it's my city. You guys talk about important things, and it's how I know what's going on in my community. And so it was just a reminder to me of the value of public comment. And I struggle a little bit with the censoring, because that meeting actually is history in our city, and it's really awful, horrible, horrible history. And so if we do, which it sounds like we have deleted those, I think it would be good to have a comment on the video play to make note that, deleted from this video is this many minutes of comments that were, fell under like hate speech and racism that we don't tolerate as a city. And so we've I think we should have a statement about deleting those, because I don't want to erase our history, because it's not a moment in time that I'm really proud of in our city, but we need to remember that there are people that live in Wheat Ridge. A lot of those people did not live in Wheat Ridge, but when we erase it, then we also kind of do ourselves a disservice. So I just want to find a balance there between not losing track of significant things that really impact us as a city, even when they're really bad. So And I do have, when we're done talking about these rules, I do actually have one more thing I'd like to add to the rules in general that don't have to do with public speech.
Yeah, correct. I think if, Mr. Mayor, if Ally could respond to one topic here real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to mention that the reason that we actually removed that section from the public version of the YouTube, we obviously maintain a copy, a separate link for Cora in the event that the clerk's office receives a public information request. It was actually because, it wasn't so much because of the hate speech as it was a resident, one of the callers actually used, came up with a fake address that happened to be a real home. I think it was 14 Skyline Drive. And that resident reached out to the mayor, very concerned about their safety, because it was a real address. And so we considered that, and that was actually the reason in that case for removing the comments. Mr. Dahl was very helpful, and he and his colleagues did some work to make sure that we were on good legal footing to do so, and we certainly didn't want to set a precedent that you're describing, Councilor Hulteen, but I just wanted to make sure everyone's clear, like, that's actually why we did it. We felt like that was fair for that particular individual, but I do like and I do think we can add a note to that YouTube video.
Thank you for explaining that.
Thank you. Councilor Snell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple questions, and this is probably just because I'm a rookie and I'm still learning. First one is item number, let's see, the number 2, the identification requirements. I think I've asked this before, but there, from what I'm reading here and what I think I've talked to maybe Mr. Goff about this before, but there's really not a way to confirm that whoever is saying, I live at this address, obviously, there's no way to say, yeah, actually you don't. You're not in Wheat Ridge or whatever. Is that true?
That's true. And in practice, I think having the requirement, please state your name and address, where in the city you live, 90+% of the time you're going to get the actual truth in the matter. And the times you're not getting the truth, as was true in November, it will be kind of obvious. And like any other thing that you hear, when you're in a quasi-judicial matter, for example, and you get hearsay testimony, you accept that testimony, it's still admissible, but you give it the weight it deserves, which is not as much. And so I think you get to more or less, I think, the same result. And some people have legitimate concerns about their safety, about their address, and I think that's to be respected. And again, I don't think the tail should wag the dog here. I think that you ask, 90% of the time you're going to get information that's helpful to you. They want you to know where they live and who their name is, and that's great. And for the people that want to sort of play games with that, that's fairly obvious, and in a way that helps you too, to even see that. So while you can require it, you can ask for it rather than require it. And I would not be in the position of saying, if you're not going to give us your name and address, you're not speaking. I would not do that.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that. My other question is, do we offer ASL interpretation in the event someone comes in who needs that?
Sure. We offer translation, I know, for, and does that include American Sign? Do you know? It does.
It does, okay. Yep, okay, thank you. Those were probably some silly questions, but I just had to clarify. Just my 2 cents, I am in favor of perhaps doing away with the donation of time, but I also would like to echo what a couple of other folks have said. I think that having more ways to access us and access our meetings and access just our city processes for residents who are genuinely concerned, care, want to be involved. I think having Zoom, having call-in, having the ability to submit comment ahead of time, those are all things that I think I value, and I think a lot of folks do. So I just want to throw that out as like the more ways that folks can access us and be a part of the meeting for doing good, I think it's well worth having those items.
Of course, and we all have telephones and email. And we're
That is
available
true.
for coffee.
That is true, and they can do that and
right.
reach any of us. True.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Back to item number 13, and this has to do with sort of the archival nature of our YouTube broadcasts. We do publish meeting minutes, but meeting minutes, as you know, are edited, because I can't imagine how many pages it would take to do a word-by-word write-down of the events that took place at a meeting. So the YouTube video that's out there is as much a part of the public record, and it's just, if not more important, I think, for the average citizen to keep up with what the city council's up to. I know that we heard shortly after our event in November that another city council was faced with a similar incident. I believe it was Boulder. And then just this last week, 1 week ago, in Durango, of all places, they had a similar incident. And the way they responded to archiving the broadcast was to place in the official video record an edit block that said, in place of the hate speech recording, it said, the public comment portion of the meeting was stopped here due to anti-Semitic hate speech. It was ruled to be out of order by the mayor. Anti-Semitic comments made prior to the intervention by the council may have also been removed from this recording. And it's just a block that comes up during that period within the broadcast. Something maybe we might want to consider, instead of just cutting out that 5 minutes or 10 minutes of that part of our agenda.
We certainly do that. I want to make a distinction again between the public record that we are required to maintain. Once it's made, it's a public record, and it's available. And if I want to come in and have it downloaded, a copy of the video for the meeting, I get the whole copy. I don't get just pieces of it, because there's not a reason to delete it under the Open Records Act. In terms of broadcast, I'm sort of a less is more person, and at the most, I think I probably suggest, putting a marker in saying, the remaining speech is speech that, while permitted under the First Amendment, is not in any way supported by the city. And that gets to kind of the last number, point 14 I made, which is counter speech, which is, in a way, in my opinion, more effective necessarily than trying to find a way to minimize or hide what, and instead you get the counter speech that every council member made. I was very proud of and very impressed by, and then in the next meeting, I think you were all impressed by the people that showed up. That's as powerful. Your point's well taken. The city can certainly do some things to create markers, I guess, but I would stop short of using that marker to prevent access. It got said in the meeting. We have a First Amendment that says you can say things in a meeting, and other people have the right to see what got said. And I really support that, but that does not mean that you have to like that or support it or hold your tongue later when you call it out. So,
Councilor Weaver.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dahl, for all of this. I really appreciate your thoughts and agree with everything you've said. And I also just want to thank the city for a really prompt response from what happened. It just, I think I was still in a state of shock, and you all were having to actually make these decisions and get it up online. And in that light, I would like to get rid of the donation of time. I don't think that's been helpful. I do think the public comment is important, and I do like all of the opportunities that we give people to have public comment, and I like the registration that we've been doing. But to your point, Mr. Dahl, I also agree that I think that it's rare that this will happen. And I also think, to your point, when this did happen, we showed a appropriate response, and then the public response that came to that, I think, is also important. And I think that's really part of the democratic dialogue that we're doing. So I agree with everything my co-counselors have said, but I also think that there's no reason to sort of create more rules other than the ones that we've appropriately done to the registration and things, and when we need to deal in the extreme case, we will deal with it. I do think public comment is very important, whether I agree with it or not, because it is free speech. And I'm not sure we should limit it to just 30 minutes, because the times that I've been in here where we've taken comment for an hour and a half to 2 hours before a meeting, it's been really important stuff. And you know what? People feel heard when they've waited their time, they've come here after work, and I feel like that's part of my job, is to hear what they have to say. So that's what I'd like to say. Thanks.
Thank you. I wanted to go through a few things on Mr. Dahl's memo. I also don't think donating time has been a beneficial process, so I would eliminate that. With respect to the sign-in requirements, I'm pretty comfortable with what we've come up with in coming in, if you're in city council chambers, to come in and sign in, and if you're going to join us online to register by, I think we're doing that at 6 o'clock. That gives quite a bit of time and still allows, I'm able to get a list of the people that have signed in to speak, so that at the beginning of the meeting, as Councilor Hulteen, I think, mentioned, you're able to factor a list of how many speakers we're going to have. So if you've got, we've had 100 at one time, and if you give everybody three minutes, that gets to be a long time. So you're able to, I would both think that we should limit the amount of time per speaker and then limit the amount of time overall, or have the right to do that at the call of the chair. With respect to the address, I was pressed on this by one of the news broadcasters that came to do an interview. He said, well, why do you take people's address? And my first item, I hadn't given it a lot of consideration, so that's the way we did it. That's the way we've always done it, which is not a really good reason. When I sat back and thought about it, what really is more important to me is for us to be able to understand whether this is a resident that lives or works in Wheat Ridge. And so I would rather put the question of, do you live or work in Wheat Ridge? Yes or no? And leave it at that. So you have an idea whether it's someone from out of state or in another city in the metro area, or an Arvada resident or a Golden resident, or a Wheat Ridge resident, or someone that works in Wheat Ridge. So that's kind of where I go in on that. Time limitation, yada, yada. I don't think that we really need to clamp down. I think we've got a pretty effective way to understand who's going to speak, and I think it's that we really want to be able to hear from our residents and citizens and other people. I don't want to limit people that might have some great ideas. Going to the rules, there were a couple of things that I wanted to go there because I do want to talk about a few of those. We have let's see. We're in the parliamentarian and rules of order. We currently are calling on Robert's Rules of Order, the most newly revised edition, to be our guiding document with respect to the rules. There's another document out there that's called Bob's Rules of Order, which Mr. Dahl is familiar with, and I'm going to let him speak about that in a minute. But this is from a local attorney that has practiced quite a bit with municipal government here in the metropolitan area. And whereas Robert's Rules of Order has about 98 different motions that you can come up with, and you can get really buried in the motion, Bob's Rules of Order has 6. And that's probably, probably maybe one or two too many for what we need to avail ourselves. But I think we should change the rules, and I'd like Mr. Dahl to talk about that for a minute.
I appreciate the opportunity. Robert's Rules of Orders, I think for groups like this, is used as an impediment and a confusing factor in a way to kind of derail. If I'm, member X and I want to derail the motion and I pull up these obscure things. And I couldn't agree more. I think that in a large body that needs it, fine, but it doesn't translate well to municipal government at this level. It simply doesn't, and instead is used as an impediment and does more harm than good. Bob's Rules is Bob Widener. He and I were partners in the same firm a million years ago, and we have a similar practice. He represents actually the city of Centennial, and his firm represents other cities as well. He's the city attorney there, and he's taken a particular interest in rules of order and procedure and has tried to make them understandable and put it more in plain English as much as a lawyer can. It's still not a small book, but I think I would very much support that, and the change would be to remove the two references to Robert's Rules of Order here, insert Bob's Rules of Order as an advisory guide, because you still don't want even those rules to be used in a given meeting as a way to obstruct, not accusing any of you of that, but just as a way of slowing things down. And in the rare case where we're only trying to figure out, is this a reconsideration motion, an amendatory motion, or a substitute? You know, it's that kind of thing. We all just want to know the right answer. We're not trying to trap each other. And in that circumstance, his rules would be very helpful. So I very much support that.
Thank you. And just in that same section E1, I think if we're able to sort of simplify the rules, I think the mayor should be the parliamentarian and not the mayor pro tem. I think you should look to the mayor to understand what the rules are, and if you have a problem after that, to go to your attorney and figure it out there.
I agree with that. The mayor runs the meeting, and it's in the past we've not had problems with this, but you don't want two people saying, well, here's whether that motion is in order or not. Someone's got to make the final decision. Okay.
And then back on the, let's see, this is on section Roman numeral 4, council meetings and procedures, and it looks like number A4. We, and I don't know whether you knew this, we give the mayor pro tem the right to schedule additional study sessions to take place at any other day and time. And I think that's too much power. Well, you know, I don't,
spoken.
So I don't know how we curtail that, but that seems to be a little extreme to me. But I'll just throw that out there. We don't seem to have any, haven't abused that. Thank you, and the other mayor pro
I
tem.
think the reason that came up, I remember when that was added, is for particular times as tonight, where we added a special study session. And when the city manager and the mayor pro tem are setting the agenda, that comes up during that discussion. So I think that's why that's there. I'm not saying it needs to be there, but
okay.
I don't know if the mayor pro tem or the city manager would have that authority to add a special study session if we didn't have that language in there.
Well, I think we could do it. It's really any day or any time.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah.
what,
Yeah,
3
that's-
3 o'clock in the morning on a
Yeah.
Tuesday, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how you want to
Yeah.
wordsmith that, but that would be, so we don't kind of run away in there. The mayor may be absent. So, anyway, I think, Mr. Dahl, you did a nice job on this. I appreciate your work. That's all that I had to offer. Mayor Pro Tem Stubbs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since there, oh, well, go ahead if you want to.
Councilor Hulteen.
Sorry, I thought I had bookmarked. I did have something that wasn't the public's right to speak that I wanted to bring up. So the one thing outside of public's right to speak, so we have in here section 3B, and again, Mayor Pro Tem, you're really the target tonight, Mayor Pro Tem. So the rule that we have in here is that the Mayor Pro Tem is elected at the first or second regular meeting in November. And I'd like us to consider moving that. I am really aware, especially with the comments from council members Snell and Larson tonight, when we have newly elected council people that are just freshly sworn in and they are getting their sea legs, so to speak, their dais legs. I think to be a thoughtful mayor pro tem, to understand what that position is and why we would pick one person and not another person, like, right after an election season, to me, maybe seems like it's not in the best interest of really actually having, like, new council members be a part of that thoughtful decision-making. So one option would be to move it. You run into a thing, right? Like, if somebody gets elected or loses their seat and we've got too much of a gap, so we could actually move it to October, because chances are you're gonna be picking a mayor pro tem who is going to be seated. And it would just, of course, then you'd be picking a mayor pro tem and maybe losing some of your council members. I'd like to hear thoughts from others about it, but I just was really aware this year with like 2 new council members, picking a mayor pro tem, having that be part of both like election season and then you guys having just gotten your orientation to participate in that. Anyway, I just would love thoughts of my peers, but I'd like to consider maybe moving that to not be right after people get sworn in.
Mayor Pro Tem Stites?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Mr. Dahl or maybe Mr. Goff, what happens if somebody is mayor pro tem and they either don't run for a second term or they're termed out or they lose their seat? And then we would have a month, let's say it was the first meeting in January, we would have like a month gap with no mayor pro tem necessarily.
Well, it's a vacancy that council has the right to fill, even sort of midterm, no matter where that midterm is. But your question's a good one, because if it's that close to the time when you would otherwise fill it, the suggestion would be it's not a position that has to be filled. You could allow it to remain vacant until that time. If that happened and I were asked, I'd say, well, you're pretty close to when you're going to fill it anyhow. It's a vacancy you have the right to fill. Whether or not, frankly, the rules talk about that, you overall have the power to fill that vacancy and can anytime.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess with that information, and I feel like, I mean, we had one meeting in December this last year. And I feel like most of the agendas are set a couple of months in advance for the most part. We're not really changing things a whole lot. So I would actually, and I would definitely not support moving it to October, because like, say in a year from now, there will be 4 new council members here, no matter what the elections, or 3 new council members and a new mayor. So, you know, if you do that election in October, then it's a completely different vote than what would happen in January. But I would, and I agree, having new councilors come in and having to pick a favorite all of a sudden isn't necessarily fair. So I would suggest that we move it to the first meeting in January, and if that position needs to sit empty for a month, I don't think that would be a huge deal. So that's my opinion on that.
Okay. Other discussion on the rules? Councilor Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question is in regards to the memo. Are we just adding some of the ones that you suggested that we prefer, or do we want to take it one by one and take consensus as to?
I've been making notes as you've gone along.
Okay, good.
I'm up to about, and I made them on the rules, so I'm up to about 6 that you could either take one at a time and direct us.
Okay, I
or
just
as
wasn't
a-
sure if I needed to be, going down the line and saying, I don't support this and
Right.
that, and making it longer than it
Yeah,
already
it'll
has been.
have to come. Your rules require that. It's,
Yeah.
first, these are brought up, recommendations are brought up in a study session, and then it has to come back for official approval. So
Okay.
I have notes too. We'll add everything we heard, and then you guys can vote yes or no on items at the regular meeting.
Although I would want to have in writing for them the things that have general support in the room here tonight.
Do you have
Yes.
a list of
And
things
we
that
have
we've
those.
done now?
Yeah.
I do.
Yep.
We can do a consensus on each one.
Okay.
That's not binding, but at least that tells us, yes, please write this one up, and we'll vote on it.
I tell you what, let's go to Mayor Pro Tem Stites. He's got a list. If he misses some, we'll go to you as a backup.
First one is off of Mr. Dahl's memo, number 11, which is the deletion of donation of time. So can I get a consensus that we move forward with deleting the time donation?
Good.
Okay. The next one was the mayor's changing the Roberts rules to Bob's rules as the advisory guide. Can I get a consensus that we move forward with that? That we make the mayor, not the mayor pro tem, the parliamentarian for the meetings. Okay. And that we move the mayor pro tem election to the first meeting in January rather than where it is in November. Okay. Those are the ones that I had that everybody had kind of nodded their head to. There might have been more.
Did you, the other one that I came up with was to just ask, do you live and work in Wheat Ridge?
And that's currently not in the rules, so if you want to add that,
I would like to add that.
add that.
That's what I'm hearing. Yep, we'll see if the.
Yes,
Yep.
Councilor Dozier.
So we require their address. Would we just be replacing it? Or is that just a request?
It's
and
just been a
not part of the-
practice at this
Okay.
point where some mayors have asked for the address. It's not actually in the rules to do it either way.
Okay.
Right now, we've changed the sign-up sheets already to just, to say, do you live in Wheat Ridge or not, or work in Wheat Ridge, yes or no, that's it. But it's not a specific rule today, either way.
Yeah.
But we can add it as a rule that all we're gonna ask is if you live in Wheat Ridge or not.
I mean, I'd almost prefer that to be more vague and be a best practice than something that's hard and fast in the rules. But I also, for just my personal opinion and preference as a council member, I like to be able to determine whether the people speaking are in my district, and then whether I need to touch base with them and connect with them on other issues. And so that's just helpful for me. And I don't know if there's any more thoughts on that.
You know, a lot of people give that address anyway out of custom, I guess. Councilor Ohm had a motion. Oh, she asked that one? She pretty sharp. Mayor Pro Tem Stites?
I agree with Councilor Dozman on that. One of the things that I do like about getting the address is that I know that they're in my district or they're not, and you know, again, where they lay as far as the problem goes. So I actually like that custom quite a bit.
So let's be specifically vague about that. Councilor Hulteen?
I forgot it. I was suggesting that we limit to spoken word only.
I'm sorry?
Limit to spoken word only.
Understanding that people may bring handouts. And I've seen that happen pretty frequently. Hello, I'm here, public comment. I have a handout to give to the city clerk, and those go down the
And we
line.
make that provision in the rules for them to hand it out, but
Yeah.
I would agree that we, under common is only the
In
spoken
person,
word.
yeah, I think we need, because we have Wheat Ridge Speaks also. It's a written words, so we just need to differentiate between the different uses.
Okay, yeah, I think we can do that.
Councilor Ohm?
Was there a consensus for that? There was.
Hang on,
So just for clarification, I understand like when there's instances of swatting that they use the TTY. So given the fact that we've had an incident where people are coming online with public comment, if we only limit the time to spoken word, I guess, does the TTY, does everybody know what that is? It's where you type in whatever you want, and then the TTY was made for people that, you're disabled, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, closed caption, yeah, but it'll actually, speak it now, especially with AI, yeah,
so spoken or written word,
I guess, okay.
that work? Spoken or written word?
but we still accept written comment.
So only allow spoken word when in person, otherwise written comment on if.
Yeah, I mean, you could get someone that says, hello, I'm here, I'm sort of shy, but I've got this handout. And that's kind of both, and I'm thinking that this, and I'll shut up in a second, but it seems to me this rule, if you want to have it, is really just designed so that there isn't sort of a wild showmanship aspect to, you know, someone wants to play a national anthem of Albania, whatever, you know, that sort of thing, which is fairly rare. Most people are bringing in the spoken or the written word. That's what they're going to give you. So if you say that rule, it gives the chair the right to say, you know, don't bring that, you know, you can't turn that recorder on, Mr. Wherever you are. Tell us what's on your mind. That's really what the rule would be meant to address.
And we don't take PowerPoint presentations. We've had that request before, too. Do we have consensus on that discussion? Okay, good.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you needed direction on number 13, like if we did need to add something to address rebroadcasting when it pertains to hate speech directly, or are we good?
I think
As
that
far
we
as that
are.
goes.
You know, what we ended up doing after the meeting in November was evaluating, you know, the safety issue for that one resident. I think that's something that can be handled on a case-by-case basis and doesn't really lend itself to a council rule. I have one request, and it kind of emanates from this whole discussion. Right now, there's a rule under general restrictions on public's right to speak, which is section Roman numeral 2, A 4B. Content of public comments are not censored other than threatening language, which is not permitted. Now, it's true we don't censor content, but you'll notice from my memo, there's that one narrow exception where if it looks as if the speech is really designed to disrupt the meeting in an absolute immediate way or make someone feel very unsafe and vulnerable in the meeting, that rises to this fire in a crowded theater level, which is pretty rare. But I think it would be helpful for the chair, in the event that were to happen, to have a little more support in the rules rather than just threatening comments, because lots of people can threaten to get you recalled. Fair game, you know, that's threatening, but it's not something you can restrict. So I would suggest adding, which I'm happy to do, some language that says threatening language, which could disrupt the meeting or reasonably cause persons in the room to feel unsafe. That gives, I think, the mayor some language like that, the ability to say, no, this is, you have crossed that line. And which is an ability he or she will use rarely, but I'd like to be able to have it here to support, you know, the mayor says, okay, we're turning that mic off. And later, if there's a challenge, we've got a rule that's thoughtfully talked about the limits of that. So if there's a consensus for that, I'd appreciate it.
Do we have consensus on that? Thank you.
Thank you.
The one right above that says that there's no limit on the number of persons who may speak. If we create a time barrier, then that would not apply. That would not be able to apply.
That's correct. And I haven't heard, though, that there was consensus for a time barrier. But
I thought that was in the meeting, or, well, to limit the individual's time is in
Right.
there, right, but not the overall time?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay,
I didn't hear that yet.
I think we should be able to set an overall time limit on the amount of, based on the people that are here to speak.
Can I make a suggestion?
Make a suggestion.
Thank you. Any sort of time you pick, 30, 60, whatever, might be arbitrary tonight. But what you really could do is two things around that, to say there's no limit on the number of persons who may speak, provided, however, that the chair at the beginning of the meeting, in looking at the volume of persons that signed up, may do one or more of the following: reduce the per speaker amount of time, because that actually happened, and I think, you do the math and you go, oh, that's 300 minutes. Let's cut it down to 200 minutes, 2 minutes a speaker, we can handle that. Or limit the total amount of time available. So that gives some flexibility for, and again, this is case by case. I think you don't need this rule ahead of time because you don't really know, but in the few cases where it looks like it'll be a problem, it allows the chair to design a public's right to speak sort of mini set of rules that will accommodate the people in the room without unwinding the whole meeting. So that would be my thought.
And my only thought on that is you said before the meeting, and I think we should do it before the public comment
Oh,
portion
yes,
of the
I
meeting.
meant to say at the outset, now you have your list.
Yeah.
So okay, there's 10 people, fine. Oh, there's 5, or there's 100. And this would allow you to exercise that power at the beginning of public comment.
But not before we gavel it open and we do the pledge.
That's,
and,
no, because,
Yeah.
no. Yeah.
Discussion on that, Councilor Dozman.
I just was curious as to how that pertains to items on the agenda as well, because sometimes you'll say if there's anyone else in the room that would like to speak on this matter, you may do so. Are we still doing that, or are we cutting that out
I was
completely?
going to cut that out, you know, if you, well, this is on the public's right to speak. When we get to
Agenda items, then it's
you know,
separate.
agenda items and those, the other things, we have a sign-in sheet for that. I was going to kind of go back to the sign-in sheet as a guiding principle for,
And so we are going to apply that to items on the agenda as well, as far as like, it's a sign-in sheet, and if you don't sign up, then you're not going to get to speak.
Well, you already have it in part, looking at Roman numeral 2A to C on page 3. For agenda items, a member of the public may speak once for each agenda item for any length of time unless the time is limited by the chair at the beginning of the item. And that gets us halfway there. The chair sees, there's 50 people signed up on that rezoning. So I'm going to declare that there's a limit now on a per speaker 3-minute limit. That doesn't get you to total number of speakers on that item, but I think you'd be careful about that. Quasi-judicial matter, I think I would take all the speakers and instead I'd limit the amount of time, but not the total, because you've got to hear it. If it's just taking way too long, that would be a circumstance where we say, okay, let's continue this hearing to 2 weeks from now to take the rest of the public, speech, and that's happened a few times.
My question was more in regards to like restricting it to sign up
I see.
only as, because the mayor typically
Yeah.
allows for people who haven't signed up but maybe come later to stand and speak. So I guess I'm just asking you on how you.
you know, what, the typical practice is not typical. Because we haven't faced a lot of these questions other than sort of this one time recently. It's, and that, I just sort of came up with that on the fly. I guess it's a good idea, If there was some sort of specifically vague language that would allow for that, that's sort of what I'm looking to with the attorney. Counselor Weaver.
Sure, we can create a little memo with a couple of alternative suggestions, and when you meet next, then it'll be in writing, and so you'll be able to act on them individually. That's fine.
Did we cover all of the things on your list that we talked about, I guess?
Yes, we did. Thank you.
Counselor Hulteen.
I'll be really fast. I know we're anxious. I was just thinking through the mayor pro tem thing on the election. And I mean, there could be instances where we have a mayor pro tem vacate for extraordinary circumstances anyway. So would it make sense to add some language in there that the mayor can appoint an interim mayor pro tem? Should there be a need for it? I mean, how would that work? Like if we had a gap between election and beginning of January, or say our mayor pro tem moved to Jamaica abruptly in August, how would that circumstance be handled?
Couldn't it just be a council vote, another council vote, just like
So
you do it now?
we can just vote to do it? Okay, all right, then we don't need that.
It's a vacancy in an office that only you appoint.
Okay,
So you
so we could just add it to an agenda and then
Yeah.
appoint?
independent of the rules, you have the right to fill a vacancy in that office.
Okay, all right, cool.
There's one item I don't think we got consensus on, sorry. The powers of the mayor pro tem, sorry, Corey. Can schedule a study session at any other day and time.
And you could certainly limit that to a time convenient to the majority of council, or some language like that.
Or, yeah. Or just when we schedule regular study sessions.
Wordsmith that for us.
Wordsmith that one.
We'll do that and bring it
Consensus on
back.
that? Wordsmith that, good.
Okay.
Any additional discussion on the rules? Good, one of our more robust discussions on rules, All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Dahl. Good memo and a good discussion. I think we made some progress. So we'll look forward to your memo coming back. So let's go back to the agenda, see where this, let's see, we gotta get to the, here, okay. We've done number 1. It looks like we finished number 2. Number 3 is staff reports. Mr. Goff.
Yes, very quickly. We are setting up a process to replace the judge. And at direction from City Council from a few weeks ago, we're creating a committee to put the RFP together, set up criteria, and there was also consensus set. Or I don't know if there was consensus, but we believe somebody on council should sit on that committee since it is one of your appointees. So if you want to make, you don't have to make that decision tonight if you don't want to, but if you'd let us know, let maybe the mayor know if you're interested. Is that all right? Then he'll let me know. If you want to, it won't be much work, but I think we need a representative from City Council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bless you. So that takes staff reports. Any additional elected officials reports? Well, if there's no more business to come before our study session, then with our thanks, we will stand adjourned.